My parents sued me for cutting off contact and tried to drag me back into their drama. Their manipulation led to a court battle. I got my friend's sister pregnant, but she lied about it. My parents disowned me, but now that they know the truth, they are pleading with me. Okay, so here's the thing, I need to get this off my chest, because my life became a total wreck around a year ago. Let me begin at the beginning, because believe me, this is one of those situations where you're just like, seriously, what the hell? I never imagined that I'd be here sharing this on Reddit, but I suppose that's what happens when your family goes crazy and you're left standing there wondering how did this even happen. My friend Dave has a sister named Jenny. Both of them have been in my life for years. It's nothing big, is it? We all grew up in the same area and occasionally hang out. Jenny was never quite like the others. I don't mean to come across as cruel, but she was dealing with some mental health issues. To be honest, it wasn't my business and I don't know all the specifics. Everyone knew Jenny struggled, but Dave never mentioned much and I didn't ask. In any case, Jenny unexpectedly called me a year ago to tell me she was pregnant. Okay, that's cool, with the exception of one little detail. She claims that I am the father. I swear, my brain just short-circuited at that very instant. I thought, wait, what? Now, let me be quite clear. I have never, ever hugged Jenny, much less had an intimate relationship with her. I was therefore unable to even comprehend her making such a ridiculous claim against me. I told her straight away, Jenny, I don't know what you're talking about, but there's no way I'm the father. We've never been close like that. However, she simply repeated it repeatedly as if I were going to magically recall a night that never occurred. To put it mildly, it was strange. Though I was secretly freaking out, I attempted to remain composed, thinking perhaps this was a result of her mental health issues or something. This is the point at which things start to go wrong. A prenatal paternity test is something Jenny declines to take. She refused to move, even though I was sitting there thinking, if you're so sure it's my kid, why wouldn't you just take the test and prove it? It was a guilt trip city, and I wasn't buying it when she said things like, you need to be there for your child, and you're abandoning us before the baby's even been born. I therefore made it plain that I would not sign anything if she chose not to take the test. I had no intention of legally binding myself to a child that wasn't mine. Easy, isn't it? That should be the end of it, I thought. I was mistaken. Boy, the familial drama begins. My parents found out a few weeks later. My parents have this whole traditional values thing going on, and the moment they learn about the issue, they lose it, like totally lose it. I still love them, though. I'm just standing there, trying to speak, but they're not listening. And they're calling me names and calling me a shame and a deadbeat. They wouldn't listen to me when I informed them. Mom, Dad, this isn't my kid. Jenny's just making stuff up. They couldn't seem to get rid of the idea that I was the one who brought this baby into the world. After that, there were many ugly arguments. To be honest, I'm still upset about things that were said that I probably can't take back. Despite my repeated assurances that it wasn't my child, my parents persisted in pressuring me to act morally and become a father. They didn't care about it. They saw me as already guilty. They stated they couldn't believe I would refuse my own child and that they didn't raise me to be a deadbeat. I was not even in the same state when Jenny would have become pregnant, which makes the situation even more bizarre. Yes, she allegedly became pregnant while spending a whole month at a friend's house. My parents dismissed this when I brought it up to them. People make mistakes, they stated. Yes, this was more than a simple error. This was a serious charge that might destroy my life. At this point, Jenny is approximately 6 months along in her pregnancy. The entire family has now turned against me. Every phone contact, text message, and family meal revolves around the idea that I must mature and assume responsibility for this child. I was going crazy. I felt as though I was in a bad dream, and no matter what I did or said, no one took me seriously. Fortunately, Most of my friends supported me, but even a few of them began to have doubts. For example, "Are you sure? Man, maybe you don't remember something?" My parents finally gave me the ultimatum. They're casting me out of their lives, disowning me, and kicking me to the curb if I don't take charge and behave like a father. They were dead serious. Despite my initial belief that they were bluffing, they made it clear to me that I would no longer be accepted in the family if I didn't comply. Indeed, they disowned me after I refused to give in. That hurt. Let me tell you, I was angry, perplexed, and simply hurt. They decided to believe someone else over me, even though they were the ones who reared me and were meant to support me. I was thrown out by my own family as if I didn't exist. It was cruel. After the baby was born, things became even more bizarre, playing the part of a proud grandmother. My mother was present at the hospital. It wasn't until later that I found out I had to deal with some legal issues to get the paternity test completed, because Jenny was still refusing to do it. Guess what happened when the results were in? Not my child. I had no possibility of becoming the father, and I had a simultaneous feeling of relief and rage. As soon as I held the paper in my hands, finally, they'll see the truth. They'll realize they were wrong, and everything will go back to normal. That was my thought when I sent my parents the results. Instead, they began bombarding my phone with requests for forgiveness, money offers, and apologies in an attempt to make things better. My dad even mailed me several hundred. The problem is that I retained the money. Yes, I did accept it after everything they had to do to me. I felt like I owed them, but pardon them? No, I made it plain that I would not expose myself to such treachery again. If they were prepared to disown me for such a thing, I understand. I truly do. While the majority of my friends supported me, others, along with my therapist, began to say things like, "Maybe you should give them another chance. They're your parents after all." However, how can you simply forgive someone who was willing to discard you so readily? When someone believes a falsehood about their own child, how can you trust them? I'm currently caught between the belief that I did nothing wrong and the question of whether I should even make an effort to mend my family's relationship. I can't get rid of the sensation that they let me down when I needed them the most, though, because every time I think about it, I recall how fast they betrayed me. Okay, so you would think that things would settle down after the drama involving Jenny's kid and my parents, wouldn't you? Not at all. My life had different ideas. If anything, the situation continued to get worse. You would think it would have ended with me proving I wasn't the father. But wow, I wish it had been that easy. It turns out that people would do anything to avoid accepting responsibility if they don't want to acknowledge that they made a mistake. I therefore thought, okay, now my parents will realize they were wrong, and maybe things can get back to normal after the paternity test results showed that I wasn't the father. However, rather than providing the solace I had hoped for, things became much more problematic. To begin with, Jenny went totally crazy. She began circulating the area with tales that I had interfered with the test in some way or had fabricated it. Yes, you read correctly. She believed that I had somehow persuaded an entire laboratory to falsify the results to support my claims. I mean, how could I possibly do that? I'm not a genius who can rig DNA testing. I'm simply an ordinary guy. Jenny, however, was not listening. She was determined to paint me as the antagonist in her tale. She went around claiming that I had deceived everyone into believing I wasn't the father and that I was leaving her and the child. It didn't matter that it didn't make sense. People began to trust her. Rumors from small towns traveled quickly, and soon I was being seen as a scumbag by people at the grocery store. I even had people come right up to me and question why I wasn't taking charge of my child. It enraged me. Nobody appeared to care that I had the test results to show that I wasn't the father. I was being held responsible for something I had nothing to do with, while Jenny was out there acting like the victim. Never in my life have I felt so powerless. Being betrayed by your family is one thing, but what about when everyone in the community believes you are the villain? That has a distinct sound. What about my parents? They were still making an effort to be polite, but it was obvious that they were also at a loss for how to respond to the scenario. My mother kept phoning and leaving heartfelt, lengthy voicemails expressing her desire for her family to reunite. She wanted to brush everything under the rug as if nothing had ever happened and didn't even discuss what had transpired. She even invited me over for dinner, as if it would suddenly undo all the harm they had caused. It was offensive, in addition to being awkward. They believed that a few family meals and some forced grins would make everything okay after what they had to do to me. Like they didn't even grasp how much trust they had broken. They just said, "Let's move on." There was no apology or recognition of how severely they had messed up. And that's the problem. Trust cannot be restored with a hug and a dinner once it has been shattered in that way. Rebuilding requires a lot of labor and effort, and they weren't even prepared to acknowledge their mistakes. The worst part was when my father attempted to buy me off. He simply emailed me to offer to buy me a new automobile if I returned to the family. As in, what did they believe? They could simply buy my pardon. I wasn't even sure how to react because it was so disconnected from reality. For a long time, I just gazed at the email, trying to determine whether it was a cruel joke. My dad was serious, though. I didn't answer. I was unable to. How can you respond to such a thing correctly? Repairing things was not important to them simply because it was convenient for them. They wanted me back in their life, and I became aware of how little they truly understood what they had done when they believed that hurling money at me would make everything better. The worst aspect, however, was discovering later that Jenny had begun contacting people I knew in an attempt to include them in her drama. She even tried to persuade Samantha, my ex-girlfriend, that I was this awful person who had left his child behind. After years of not communicating, Sam suddenly texted me saying, "We need to talk." I didn't know what she was talking about at first, but when she revealed that Jenny had been attempting to rekindle old drama by contacting her, I nearly lost it. I told Jenny to cease over the phone. I wasn't going to allow her to include my friends and ex-partners in her mess. I was done with the lies and the games. However, she simply hung up after laughing. Talking to her was like talking into a wall. Nothing I said would reach her since she was so engrossed in her fantasy world. By now, I was thinking about hiring a lawyer quite seriously. Even though I didn't want to go that far, I had no other option. I felt like I had no one on my side, while Jenny was out there damaging my reputation and my parents were supporting her actions. Yes, I had the support of my closest friends, but even they were unaware of how awful things had gotten. At some point, I had to decide. I couldn't continue to wait for the next insane claim or rumor to surface, living in a condition of continual tension. I made the decision to sever all connections, not just with Jenny, but also with my parents. It wasn't simple. In fact, it was awful. However, I realized I couldn't allow them to continue to bring me down. I sent my parents a lengthy email outlining my feelings of betrayal, my failure to trust them, and my inability to trust them going forward. Nothing was sugar-coated by me. I was honest with them, telling them that I wasn't ready to forgive them and that I wasn't sure if I would ever be. I advised them to start by sincerely apologizing and accepting responsibility for their conduct if they want to have any chance of a future relationship with me. No more acting as though nothing was wrong. There's no more ignoring issues regarding Jenny. I blocked her on all platforms. Her machinations were becoming too much for me to handle. I wasn't going to allow her to continue entangling me in her mess since she wasn't my concern. I even had to inform her brother, Dave, that I would not be able to spend some time with his family. Dave has always been a great buddy, but so that was difficult, but I had to prioritize my own health. I took them off a few months ago, and to be honest, I've been relieved. Even if I occasionally feel bad or question my decision, I know that ultimately I made the right choice. Even though it's difficult, there are moments when you have to leave. It's messy and convoluted, to be sure, but at least I'm not always watching for the next catastrophe to occur. At last, I'm able to breathe. But man, I never would have believed you if you had told me a year ago that this is where I would wind up. I suppose that's just the way life is. First update. Okay, so this is where it gets even stranger. I believe that the pandemonium would be resolved if I severed my relationship with Jenny and my parents. I reason that if I cut them out of my life, everything would settle down and I could move on. Naturally, however, things are not so simple. Terminating them, and that was only the start of a whole new problem. A few weeks after blocking Jenny and sending the email to my parents, I received an unexpected contact from Mike, an old acquaintance from high school. He suddenly asked how I was doing, even though we hadn't spoken in years. Okay, that's random, I thought at first, but then he informed me that my parents contacted him in the past. Mike and I weren't even that close. So, why would my parents get in touch with him? That was a serious warning sign. It seems that they had been attempting to persuade others to speak with me on their behalf. I'm speaking of longtime acquaintances, distant family members, and even folks I don't really know. They were telling everyone that they were concerned about me and that I was in a horrible position. They seemed to be attempting to paint me as the unstable one. What's the worst? They were presenting the entire situation as though I should have apologized for interrupting them. Mike didn't mind. He wanted to alert me because he knew something was wrong. But it went beyond that. I began receiving messages from a wide range of people over the course of the following few days, including some I had just met a few times and others I hadn't spoken to in years. It was crazy. Everything they were saying was the same. Your parents are really worried about you, or you should give them another chance. Somehow, they had persuaded everyone that I was the villain in this scenario, that I had lost my mind and had to make amends. It was unbelievable to me. My parents were out here waging a full-fledged public relations campaign to paint me as the villain while I was simply trying to move on with my life. I had the impression that I was in a strange parallel dimension where nothing made sense. I tried to avoid the drama as much as possible, but it kept coming back to me. When they contacted my employer, it was the last straw. You heard correctly. My parents gave my workplace a call. I'm not even sure how they obtained the number, but they managed to locate my boss's phone number and called the office to inform him that I wasn't feeling well. How embarrassing must that have been? One day, with a serious expression on his face, my employer took me into his office and asked me how things were at home. I was taken aback at first. I wasn't even sure what to say. When your boss asks if your parents believe you've lost your mind, what do you say? Fortunately, he was really understanding when I told him the whole issue, even if he expressed regret for bringing it up. The damage had already been done, though. My own parents were now attempting to interfere with my work. They seemed intent on ruining everything for me simply because I refused to comply with their demands. Then, there was nothing I could do to obtain a restraining order against them. I went to a lawyer and began the process. Even though I didn't want to go that far, I had no other option. They were interfering with my friends, my career, and my mental health. Even if it meant officially cutting them off, I had to defend myself. The procedure was drawn out, intense. Along with the paperwork and court dates, there was a great deal of tension. However, I also experienced a strange sense of relaxation. I felt like I was finally taking charge of the matter. I will no longer allow them to take over every aspect of my life, no more allowing them to control the story. Naturally, chaos ensued when they learned about the restraining order. In a lengthy guilt-ridden email, my mother told me how she never thought her own son would act in this way and that family should always remain united. She said that I was the source of all the suffering and that I was destroying the family. I didn't bite, but it was textbook manipulation. I didn't answer. It grew worse before it got better, though I wish I could say that was the end of it. One day, my car was vandalized when I got home from work. The word liar had been keyed into its side by someone. I didn't have any evidence that it was my parents, but really, who else could it be? Other than a few close friends, I hadn't disclosed the restraining order to anyone. The only people with an incentive to do such a thing were my parents. They had to strike out in any way they could since it seemed like they couldn't lose control. I reported it to the police, but it was never resolved. Another reminder that sometimes the ones who should love you the most can become your worst adversaries, even if you attempt to do things the right way. In order to be safe, I then began parking my car at a friend's house. I had to stop taking chances in case they tried something similar. I even put security cameras around my apartment. I had the impression that I was constantly on edge, waiting for anything to happen, but after a while, things began to settle down. After the restraining order was granted, my parents were prohibited from getting in touch with me or visiting my house or place of employment. My shoulders were greatly relieved. I was able to breathe for the first time in what seemed like an eternity. Even after several months, I'm still getting my bearings. I had to explain the entire scenario to my friends and co-workers and make sure they understood the truth, which required a lot of damage control, while some were doubtful. The majority were supportive. Do you honestly think your folks would go that far? I understand it's difficult to accept. You understand. However, how far some individuals will go when they feel like they're losing control, since you've been there yourself. In retrospect, I never thought things would become this terrible. It's amazing how easily a family may turn against you if you don't follow their rules. All of this has taught me one vital lesson, though. You cannot allow anyone, not even your family, to dictate how you live your life, even if it hurts. There are times when you have to make the difficult decision to leave. I have no idea what the future holds for my parents and me. Perhaps they will come to their senses and truly apologize, perhaps not. In any case, I'm done allowing them to rule my life. I'm not looking back. I have my own road to follow. Second update. Okay, so this is when things start to change. I assumed things would finally calm down when I obtained the restraining order and began attempting to start over. Unexpectedly, however, life had other ideas. My folks found a new method to play tricks on me. Just when I was starting to feel like I could breathe again, it wasn't direct contact this time. It wasn't sending emails or damaging my car. No, this was messed up on a completely different level. I'm sitting at home one day, taking care of nothing, when I receive a letter in the mail. That's not too strange, is it? This letter, however, came from a lawyer. I initially assumed it had to do with a restraining order, possibly some last-minute paperwork or something. However, no, a lawsuit was filed. For what, you ask? My own parents were suing me, suffering on an emotional level. I was reading something that I couldn't even believe. They were actually suing me for interrupting them, claiming they were entitled to compensation since my actions had seriously damaged their mental well-being. They went so far as to say that I had cut them off from the rest of the family, which was absurd because it was they who isolated me, not the other way around. For a good 5 minutes, I just sat there and stared at the letter, trying to take in the situation. Who, after all, does that because they are upset over being cut off? Who sues their own child? I was at a loss for what to do. There was a part of me that was extremely worried, and another part of me wanted to chuckle at how absurd it all was. This was legal now, and it was going to get really unpleasant. It was no longer just a family drama. I immediately called my attorney. This was too much for me to do alone. I was as surprised as she was. She had witnessed many unpleasant family issues, but bringing a lawsuit against your own child for emotional distress, even for her, that was novel. We discussed the lawsuit specifics, and even though most of it was obviously false, I felt we couldn't ignore it since they were sincere. I had to defend myself. The weeks that followed were filled with stress, phone calls, and meetings. The findings of the paternity test, the restraining order, and the harassment I had been experiencing were all pieces of proof I needed to collect. It felt unreal that it had come to this. Even though my lawyer was sure we could win when I refused to allow my parents to dominate me anymore, they tried to drag me through the mud in court. The problem is that they went beyond the case. Unfortunately, they had to go farther in an attempt to turn other family members against me. They began contacting them. I began receiving messages from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, including aunts, uncles, and cousins. "Why can't you just make peace with your parents?" was what they were all saying. "You're acting self-centered." They seemed to have been indoctrinated to believe that I was the bad guy in this whole situation. I was incensed about the entire scenario, not just my parents. It seemed like they always managed to change the story and paint me as the villain, regardless of what I did or how hard I tried to defend myself, because you set limits. Your parents are suing you for emotional distress. How can you convey that to someone who is only hearing one side of the story? I eventually had to cut off even more individuals because of it. I unfriended people on social media, blocked family members, and generally cut off any ties to that aspect of my life. I couldn't keep defending myself to people who had already made up their minds not because I didn't care about them. I did. It was tiring, and I had had enough of defending my choices to those who refused to consider the wider picture. The court date eventually arrived. I arrived with my attorney, ready for whatever they would hurl at me, and it was a circus, I tell you. My parents had a full sob story prepared about how they had always supported me, how they had attempted to help me get through difficult times, and how I had rudely interrupted them without cause, since they were the ones who initially disowned me. It was quite amazing how they portrayed themselves as the victims in all of this, but it didn't sit well with my lawyer. She dissected their claims in detail, presenting the judge with all of the proof of their harassment, including the paternity test and the restraining order. By the end of it, you could tell the court wasn't buying their story, and it was awful. The judge gave me a favorable ruling in the end. It was a minor success because the lawsuit was obviously dismissed and my parents were compelled to pay my legal bills. It didn't feel like a victory, though. Even though I did win, there was still a lot of aftermath to cope with, and it seemed like I had just left a nightmare. My parents made a last-ditch attempt to reintegrate into my life following the case. They wrote me this lengthy, heartfelt letter in which they expressed their regret for everything, their desire to put things right, and their inability to stand the thought of losing me. To be honest, I didn't even answer, and it was the same old guilt-tripping rubbish they had been doing from the beginning. I had already decided that I would not return. A person can only endure so much until they are forced to leave permanently. Indeed, it was painful. No matter how terrible things become, it's not simple to cut off your family. However, there are situations when it's essential for your own mental health. No matter how much they pretended to love me, I couldn't allow them to continue entangling me in their mess. I refused to let their poisonous form of love continue to contaminate my life. That's where I am at the moment. I'm moving on. The restraining order is still in effect, and the case is behind me. Although it hasn't been simple, I'm learning to live without the commotion and the never-ending worrying about when the next catastrophe will strike. It feels pretty damn wonderful to feel like I have some control over my life for the first time in a long time. I have no idea what the future will bring. Perhaps things will change in the future. They might not. But for now, I'm concentrating on taking care of myself and repairing the aspects of my life that they attempted to destroy. Though it has taken a while, I am beginning to glimpse the end of the tunnel. Third update. Okay. So, if you've been following along, you would think that the restraining order and the legal issue would put an end to the chaos. However, no, my family managed to give me a final surprise. To be honest, this one made me shake my head since I didn't believe they could go any lower. However, here we are. The situation had finally begun to settle down a few months following the court's decision in my favor. For the first time in what seemed like an eternity, I was able to concentrate on starting again after severing my connections with everyone who was stressing me out. No letters from lawyers, no sporadic communications from old friends, just quiet. At least, that's what I believed. I ran into my cousin Melissa one day while out on errands, doing routine tasks like grocery shopping. Now, throughout all of this drama, Melissa and I hadn't spoken much. Although we were never particularly close as children, we always got along. I decided to say hello to her when I spotted her. We ended up talking for a while, and initially, it was just your typical conversation catching up on work, life, and other things. She suddenly interrupts me, though, saying, "Hey, did you hear what your parents are planning?" I went cold. "Are you planning?" I asked, experiencing that old pit in my gut all of a sudden. Melissa sighed and continued, although she appeared a little uneasy, as if she wasn't sure if she should even tell me. "Yes, next month there will be a large family reunion. It seems that they have been telling everyone that they hope you and them will be able to reconcile." It was unbelievable to me. They were actually preparing an ambush reunion in an attempt to reintegrate me into the family. They were inviting everyone, including distant relatives, family friends, and individuals I hadn't seen in years, Melissa revealed. When I asked for more information, "What's the kicker?" they had been pretending that I was aware of the entire situation and informing everyone that I would be present. I was enraged. They had made me out to be the villain if I didn't turn up, even though I hadn't agreed to anything. My parents' standard tactic was to control the issue, paint me as the bad guy, and attempt to guilt-trip me into complying with their wishes. I told Melissa upfront that I wasn't going, and I thanked her for informing me. Even she appeared somewhat conflicted, as if she were falling for my parents' "we just want to fix things" line of reasoning. She wanted me to go and put things right, and I could see it in her expression. However, I was not going to fall into that trap. After everything they had done that evening, I went home and gave it a lot of thought. I felt compelled to say something, even though I knew I wouldn't be attending the reunion. Since I couldn't ignore this, I made the decision to send my parents a final email outlining everything in detail. I sat down and sent them an email the following morning. It was brief, but straightforward. I informed them that I was aware of the reunion and that I would not be attending. I made it plain that I didn't want to participate in any coerced reconciliation, certainly not in front of a large group of people. I advised them to respect my limits first if they were sincere about making things right, and there was nothing else to discuss until they were able to accomplish it. To be honest, I didn't need a response and didn't anticipate one. This was the last time I needed to correct the record. Naturally, though, my parents were unable to ignore it. My dad phoned me a few days later. He left a lengthy, meandering voicemail about how I was destroying the family and how this reunion was meant to be a new beginning for everyone. But I didn't answer. He even said, "Your grandparents would be so disappointed in how you're handling this," in an attempt to put me under guilt. That voicemail really got to me. It made me think of all the times my parents had manipulated me and used guilt to get what they wanted, not because I believed it. They would use any tactic they could to make me feel like the issue, even if it meant bringing up my grandparents, who incidentally had always been there for me. They were unable to acknowledge that perhaps, just possibly, they were the ones who needed to examine themselves closely. I left the voicemail unanswered. What was the purpose? I was not going to allow them to drag me back into their drama after I had finished speaking. However, it continued to bother me for days after that. I thought I was simply refusing to make peace, and I kept thinking about the reunion and all the family who would be present. I questioned how many of them were receiving the distorted version my parents were giving them and how many of them truly understood the whole story. In the aftermath of the reunion, I never heard from my parents again. On Facebook, I came across pictures of joyful grins, family embraces, and other such scenes. My parents were grinning and behaving as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't just spent the last year attempting to ruin my life. Seeing them act as though everything was flawless was strange. However, I suppose they were always skilled at acting. Melissa informed me the reunion had been unpleasant when I saw her again a few weeks later. It seems that many people were expecting me to arrive, and some awkward talks ensued when I didn't. According to Melissa, my parents' attempts to explain my absence were not well received. Some family members even began to wonder why I wasn't present and why my parents hadn't been more forthright about the whole thing. After all, I suppose not everyone believed their story, and I suppose that's the current situation. Even though I've been able to put the drama behind me, I know it's always there, just beneath the surface. I've come to terms with the fact that my parents are unlikely to acknowledge their mistakes. I can't alter them, but I can safeguard myself, continue to live my life independently of them, and concentrate on the individuals who genuinely care about me. It has been a long journey, and I will admit that there are still moments when it hurts. It's difficult to cut off relatives, and sometimes I question whether I made the right decision, but I knew in my heart that I had to. They kept attempting to pull me into a toxic loop, but I had to choose me, my future, and my mental health. That concludes this crazy journey. Things may or may not change in the future. In any case, I'm tired of allowing my family to dictate how I live. Now that I have my own road to follow, I'm doing it on my own terms for the first time in a long time. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. My husband told me that he's in love with my sister. I'm pregnant and I don't know why this is happening to me. My sister and I had a shitty life growing up with a passive mother and abusive stepfather. My sister was my protector and role model since no one of the adults were. She tried to shift my stepdad's abuse on her when he got drunk so he wouldn't hurt me. When she left for college, she let me stay in her bed while she slept on the floor in her student room. The days I managed to run away from home when I turned 16, she let me move in with her permanently. We never saw our parents again. My husband is very similar to my sister. They're both very calm and kind. Both are very intelligent. They have the same sense of humor, love the same music, books, movies, and games. It's like a weird, perverted thing that I found the male version of my sister to fall in love with. They get along very well, and that was so important to me because they're my only family. We got married a year ago after 6 years together, and I'm 27, pregnant now with our first baby. My sister met her BF me 30 a year ago. He got along very well with me and my husband, although I always felt that my husband never really liked the guy. When I asked him once why he didn't like him, he got flustered and told me that he didn't know. It was noticeable, and he apologized. He told me he just didn't think he was good enough for her. Her BF proposed to my sister last night. We were just having pizzas, and they were having beers on my sister's balcony, and the BF just suddenly went down on his knees and took out a ring. She was very surprised, but happy all the same and said yes. When we went back home, my husband was a little tipsy. He told me he wasn't tired and that he's going to have one more beer and watch TV and that I should go to bed. I went back to the living area and he was sitting there crying. I asked him what's going on, and he told me he was in love with my sister, has been for years, but that he knew how wrong this was. He told me that he loved me very much and promised to be a good husband and father to our daughter. He slept on the couch. He's still sleeping now. I'm shocked and full of anxiety. I don't know what to do or how to feel about this. My sister. Should I tell her? Nothing can be the same again, but she's my only family and my best friend, and my husband. Is this over? I have been so blind. Now I see everything. Of course, he's in love with her. How could I be shocked now? Can I save this marriage and my baby? I promised her a better life than the one I had. I promised her kind and loving parents. I can't let her come to this world with estranged parents and new people in their lives. What can I do? Edit for an update. He is awake now and I have spoken to him. He apologized for hurting me last night. He said that he just felt despair, like he had something very beloved and important in his life that he lost, and he was mourning it. He told me that he loved me very much and he wanted for this to work for us and the baby. I asked him if he loved her more than me, and he said it's just a different type of love. I asked him if he could choose between me or her, and he said he'd choose me. I asked him if he thought she was more beautiful, and he said that I'm conventionally more attractive. I asked him if he has stayed with me all these years to be near her. He said I was being unfair to him because he did love me. I asked him if he was okay never seeing her again. He teared up but then said he would do anything to save this marriage. He then added that he never really had a mother or a female figure in his life. That's probably why he's attached to her, because she's very warm and loving. I asked him, "Do you love her as a mother figure, or do you want to sleep with her?" He didn't want to answer. I asked him if he fantasized about her while sleeping with me. He refused to answer at first and then said, "Why are you doing this to yourself?" I asked him, "Will you lose interest in me if she's out of our lives and it's just us?" He looked like he was thinking about this for the first time, and then he said that he chose me and my baby. He wants to start therapy and counseling because he thinks this marriage is salvageable. Update 2. We had dinner with my sister and her fiancé. My husband was unusually silent and didn't initiate any talk with my sister, and he barely looked at her. It was a nice dinner. My sister is too happy to notice anything with her engagement and trip tomorrow. Before she went, however, my husband hugged her longer than usual. He told her he was happy for her and wished her a great trip, all while hugging her. Then he held her hand and told her, "I didn't congratulate you properly yesterday because I was drunk," and he congratulated her again. He was tearing up again. Then he hugged my sister's fiancé and congratulated him. He was silent on our way home. He told me he loved me when we got back and that he will do anything to make this work, but that I shouldn't make any decisions while hurt. We are starting couples therapy. I want him to be 100% honest. He asked me not to tell anyone about his confession because it meant nothing. I told him that I didn't want him around my sister anymore if I would give him a chance. He asked me how this would work when we were always together. She will suspect something, and he doesn't want me to tell her because he's embarrassed. I told him he could just minimize his interactions with her. I told him to sleep on the couch again tonight because I haven't made up my mind about my next move yet, and that until then it's the couch for him. Good night and thanks for everything, including teaching me how to make bold text. What an exhausting day. Update 3. I'm thankful for everyone who's reaching out asking for any new updates. I just don't think I have enough information to make a new post, but I have gone through all the comments and thank you. I asked my husband for separation because I need to be on my own to make my decision. We are also starting MC, whether we stay together or not. I want to know everything that he has been withholding from me. He thinks I'm torturing myself, but he's wrong. I'm tortured with half-truths, with MC. I'm hoping I can get to the bottom of his feelings in a safe environment. He cried when I told him that I wanted to separate. He told me he had lost everything in one day because of a drunk confession that meant nothing. He loves me and he wants to be with me. He suggested that we move away. He has had job offers in other cities on several occasions. He said this could be our new start. We were renovating the basement this summer to make it a guest room because our current guest room is being turned into a baby room. He will live in the basement. It has separate entrances, and the mini kitchen is almost finished. I have decided not to tell my sister about any of this. This is my battle and my marriage. I love my sister so much, but I'll be very honest here. I resent her. I'm jealous of her, and I think I have always been jealous of her. She's a way better person than I am. I hate that I never had the chance to return the favor as she always was perfect and never needed help. I resent that she isn't as angry as I'm about the injustice we had to endure. I hate that she's so good to me and my husband. I hate that she sees how much better of a person she is, and I hate that I don't blame her for loving her instead of me. Update 4. My husband confessed to being in love with my sister. The aftermath. Hi, I was here about a month ago with my wife about my husband breaking down and confessing that he was in love with my sister and has been for years. The short version is that we're getting a divorce and that he doesn't want to have anything to do with our daughter. I will include the original post After my sister's engagement and his confession, he made me promise that he will love me and that he's going to do all in his power to be a good and loving husband and father. He didn't want me to tell my sister anything because he was embarrassed, and we slowly started to plan a future together in another city. He was already getting a better job offer in the other city, and now he thought it was time to move on. I agreed. We started MC. I told my sister that we were moving, and she was very distraught, but she has always supported me. I don't know if she felt it was weird that my husband wasn't hanging with us anymore, but she never asked. She was probably just busy with her own happiness and the changes in her life. After her vacation, she came home and told me everything. She was pregnant and she was glowing. And that was the reason for this sudden engagement. Her fiancé wants to get married before the baby is born. She asked me to keep it a secret. She probably didn't mean even for my husband, but I kept it a secret anyway because she was waiting for the second trimester to make the announcement. She finally broke down crying about me moving away when she needed me the most, but then later apologized for being selfish. She understood that we needed to provide the best life for my daughter, including finding better jobs elsewhere. I cried for a whole week, a week ago. My husband was in a job interview in the other city, and he was going to stay there for the week to sign a lease to a new apartment. We thought we could try out the new life before selling our house to buy a new one there. My sister and her boyfriend made the announcement that they were expecting last Tuesday, the day after my husband's interview. Not 30 minutes later, my husband called me. He was drunk and he was crying and asking if it was true and if I knew. He called me a cruel liar for not telling him. He said it was so unfair. My sister's fiancé was a loser and he didn't deserve her. Her fiancé is a carpenter and my sister is a pediatrician, and he told me he needed to be alone for a while, so he switched off his phone. Friday, he texted me that he didn't want to be with me anymore and that he didn't want to be in my daughter's life. He was sorry but couldn't do it anymore. If I agreed to free him from his responsibilities as a father, he would leave me the house. I tried calling him, but he had switched off his phone again. I cried all night. Yesterday morning, my sister called me to ask what's up. My husband has asked her to meet up with him because he wanted to tell her something that he couldn't say over the phone, that he was coming on Monday to see her. She asked me what's going on, but I was too tired to tell her anything. She and her fiancé are coming over today, and I will probably need to tell her everything now. Final update. Hi again. I knew I could count on you for support. My sister was here, and I told her everything. I got help from showing her parts of what I have written here because, honestly, I'm too tired to go into details about what I've been going through all these weeks. I told her that Lucas was going to call, asking to meet her, probably to tell her he loved her, or maybe something more sinister, so she needs to stay away from him. Her fiancé was on the edge of his seat with anger. My sister was just crying and apologizing and trying to hug and stroke my hair. I hated her touch. I don't know why. I know nothing is her fault. I told my sister that now I warned her. I want to be on my own for a while and that I didn't want any contact with any of them. I have been thinking about moving to another city. There's a small town that one of my best high school friends lives in after getting married. It's up north, and everything is bigger and better and cheaper. I can easily find a small rental until the divorce is final, and I can easily get a job there. If I can manage a pace there, I can give birth up there with zero stress. I texted my husband that I've told my sister everything and that both her and her fiancé aren't happy. He called me an hour later. He apologized and told me he didn't mean to freak her out. He just wanted to see her and say goodbye, but that he won't bother her if she feels scared. He's still the same man and wouldn't let anything happen to her. He didn't ask about me or my baby. He's staying in the new place and he's starting his new job in September. He thought he would come back to say goodbye before moving to his new city permanently. My sister texted me later that she loved me and that she would stay out of my way if that's what I wanted, but to please not go through with my plans to move because she needs me and she would do anything to make it up to me. I didn't answer. I hate it when she's so perfect and kind. Spot on comment. Comment 1. Tragic that her disgusting pig of a husband successfully drove her to resent her sister, even though it sounds like she did nothing wrong. Hopefully, Op can get the help she needs to process this terrible situation without allowing it to destroy her relationship with the sister. Comment 2. That sucks to read. After all the things she said about her, I understand the frustration. I think she idolizes her sister to the point she thinks she's perfect. In reality, I think her sister probably has a lot of practice insulating her from her own issues. Op deserves to maintain that relationship. It only gives power to her husband by giving in. Comment 3. I'm worried about Op based on one of her most recent comments. Apparently, her husband is just troubled and hurt. No, I want a new start with new people and leave all this pain behind. I'm tired. And she's a constant reminder of literally all the pain I can think of. And now she has the love she always deserved and is waiting for a baby. With that love she has her new big family, her fiancé that has embraced her, and she has the love of my husband, who I know deep down is just troubled and hurt. And what do I have? I want a new life away from all this pain. I hate everything about her. Comment 4. That's sad. I hope Op doesn't move away from her sister. It's bad enough that this guy had to destroy their marriage and abandon his daughter, to also cause resentment towards the sister, resulting in Op throwing away her only remaining support system as she's about to become a single mom. Makes it even worse. Comment 5. I think you might be right, but I can't imagine him thinking the sister, if she is the great person she has portrayed here, would even consider it for 1 second. If he thinks she would, he is crazy. He literally told his wife he wanted nothing to do with their daughter. Why would she want a man that is a deadbeat dad to her niece? I wonder how he envisions this playing out at family get-togethers. This guy is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Comment 6. He fully wanted both. He picked the younger one, with a maybe less high-powered job to have his babies, and then expected the constant companionship of the one his age, whose personality he enjoyed. And he thought she wouldn't marry and always be around, like Charles Dickens moving in his wife's sister. Sad. The husband is actually nothing like the sister, who was always there for Op. I hope Op can get over her resentment for her sister, and they can bring up their babies together happily, with a carpenter fiancé and a better man for Op. Comment 7. The sisters come from a violent home, where the younger sister had to watch the older being quite literally tortured in her place, which is a terrible thing to do to the older, but it creates terrifying damage to both children. This will absolutely be why the younger sister feels the older is better than her in every way. As a child, she was able to survive because of her older sister. No wonder that person is on a pedestal. It isn't anything that can ever be repaid, even in part. How do you repay a hero anyway? Especially when you were also traumatized. It's a debt that will never, ever end. It's a permanent connection between them. And then the younger sister's husband basically ran around with her for years, while keeping the other one close, because he loves the older sister specifically for the personality she developed while sacrificing for the younger sister. As an adult, she's now in the position of seeing that debt weaponized against her and her own unborn child by someone who was supposed to love her for herself. It's no wonder the younger sister's ego has been destroyed. Her sense of self has been crushed. She's been convinced she's just profoundly less than, and she's going to be angry and hateful, because that's the last defense she has left. She's pregnant, alone, and the bad guy, so she projects to survive. I hope the space she has given allows her to heal and reconnect with her lovely human older sister as a person, not as a hero. And I hope her ex-husband is infested by the fleas of 1,000 camels. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.